Hello, my name is Zach Gibbs, and I'm a content developer within education services inside Juniper Networks. And today we will be discussing the Understanding Unified Policies Processing Learning Byte. So let's discuss Security Policy Processing Order. So before version 18.2, policies are processed sequentially. You have zone-based policies and global-based policies. Zone-based policies are processed first. Global-based policies are processed next. And so what that means, if you have a host and that host is going to match with the traffic it's sending, is going to match a zone-based policy and a global-based policy, the zone-based policy will be applied and the global-based policy will not be applied. Okay, so let's talk about 18.2 and later. Policies are still processed sequentially, but with some caveats, and we talk about the caveats on the slide. Zone-based policies are processed first. Global-based policies are still processed last. But within zone-based and global-based policies, there are some things we need to talk about. So if there is a policy configured, say there's a couple different policies. The policies that have no dynamic application or the dynamic application is set to none will be applied first. Then any policies with a dynamic application configured, that is a specific dynamic application or the dynamic application can be set to any, that will be processed next. Now that's true for zone-based and global-based policies. So for example, if you have some zone-based policies configured and you have one policy that has no dynamic application, you have another policy that does have a dynamic application, and you have a host that is sending traffic through the SRX device that matches both those policies, it's going to match the policy that doesn't have a dynamic application set to it. So keep that in mind, that's how it works. And so how this works with between zone-based and global-based policies is that if the traffic matches a zone-based policy, it's going to hit that policy first no matter what. If it matches a global-based policy and not a zone-based policy, then it will hit the global-based policy. And we'll have an example of that in the CLI when we jump into that. Right, so here's our example. We have the user connected to the SRX device that connects to the internet. And we're going to configure some zone-based unified policies. We are going to configure a policy with dynamic applications, and we're going to configure a policy without dynamic applications. And we're going to see how the host traffic, both these policies are going to match the user. So we're going to see how that user's traffic, which policy it uses. And then we're going to talk about zone-based versus global-based, show that zone-based policies are honored first, and go from there. So let's go ahead and jump to the CLI. All right, so here is the vSRX1 CLI, and we're going to jump into configuration mode, edit security policies from zone users to zone internet, and we're going to create a policy called DYN for a dynamic application. This is going to be our policy that has the dynamic application set in it. So we're going to set a source address at any that'll match on the user, destination, any, application, any, and then the dynamic application is going to be set to any. So we're going to grab any dynamic application that the user tries to use when it sends traffic. Okay, then we have to set the then parameters. We're going to set permit. Now we're going to set some application services of SSL proxy. And the reason why we're going to do that is we're going to be dealing with some web traffic that is encrypted. And we're going to count the traffic. Create a new policy called no-dyne. So this is not going to have the dynamic application. So we're not going to specify the dynamic application there. And we're going to specify an SSL proxy profile. Now this SSL proxy profile was configured earlier, so we're not going to cover how to configure that. There are other learning bytes that I have done that do show how to configure SSL proxy. Okay, so we have our policies set up correctly. Let's go ahead and commit the configuration. And so as we're looking at this, the thing that should happen is that even though the policy with the dynamic application is first, the user traffic is still going to hit the policy no-dyne because that doesn't have a dynamic application set. So let's go ahead and jump to the user device. Okay, here is the user device, and let's go ahead and open Chrome. And that'll open to my homepage, which is juniper.net. I've heard that's a good website. And so now that that's loaded, let's go ahead and close the website and jump back to vSRX1 to look at the CLI. All right, here's vSRX1. Look at the policy detail. If we scroll up, we can see that there is nothing that hit that first policy, which is DYN, D-Y-N. So that first policy, nothing's hitting. If we scroll back down, we can see that everything's hitting the no dyne policy. Perfect. So let's go ahead and clear the policy statistics. Clear the session table. And we want to add the dynamic application statement to the no dyne policy. Just set that to any. So at this point, it should hit the first policy, the dyne policy. Let's go ahead and clear the statistics just to make sure everything's cleared out. And clear the session table again, just to make sure we don't have anything left over. So let's go ahead and jump back to the user device. Let's go ahead and open Chrome again. And that'll load up juniper.net. Okay, that's loaded up. Let's close that and jump back to the vSRX1 CLI. All right, here is the vSRX1 CLI. Let's look at the policies, and perfect. This is what we want to see. If we scroll up, we can see that the dyne policy is matching the traffic now. That's perfect. If we scroll back down, we can see that the no dyne policy is not matching any traffic. That's what we expected to see. All right, so the last thing we want to do is we want to throw in global policies in this mix and see how it works with zone-based policies. So let's configure some global-based policies. Call this gdyne. It's going to have the dynamic application. And then after that, we want to edit a policy called gnodyne, which won't have the dynamic application. Look at all the policies, and great, everything's there. Let's go ahead and clear the statistics. Clear the session table as well, just to make sure there's nothing there. And let's go ahead and jump back to the user. Okay, here is the user. Let's go ahead and open Chrome. That'll load up juniper.net. Okay, let's close that and jump back to the vSRX CLI. All right, here is the vSRX CLI. When we look at the policy, we can see that the global policy, gnodyne, didn't hit. We can scroll up. We see that the gdyne, which has the dynamic application, didn't get hit either. And we have to scroll all the way up pretty much to the top of the output to see that it was the dyne application again. So we're honoring zone-based policies first. That's perfect. That's what we want to see. So if we were to deactivate the zone-based policies, how is that going to change things? Clear the statistics and the flows. And let's go ahead and jump back to the user. Okay, here is the user device. Let's open Chrome. That'll open juniper.net. Let's go ahead and close that. And then jump back to the vSRX device. All right, here is the vSRX device. Let's look at the statistics. And so we look at the statistics, and we can see that things aren't as planned. I was planning on hitting that gnodyne policy, but it looks like I hit the dyne policy. And I think I know what I did wrong. I think I forgot something. So if we look at the policies, you can see that with the gdyne policy, I did forget to add in that dynamic application. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and clear these statistics. Clear out the session table just in case. And let's go ahead and jump back to the user. Let's open Chrome. And okay, that's great. Open the web page, juniper.net. Let's close that and go back to the vSRX1 CLI. All right, here is vSRX1. Let's go ahead and show the security statistics or the policy statistics. All right, this looks much better. This is what I expected. The policy G no dyn is servicing the traffic. So we scroll up, we can see that, yeah, there's no traffic that's come through with the G dyn policy. That's perfect. And so if we were to set the no dyn policy, the G no dyn policy, to have an application, then it's going to hit the first policy. Let's go ahead and commit that. Clear out the session table, and let's jump back to the user. Here is the user device. Let's open Chrome. That'll open juniper.net. And let's go ahead and close that. Let's jump back to VSRX1. Okay, here is VSRX1. Let's look at the policy statistics. And we can see that the G no dyn policy is now not servicing the traffic. And if we scroll up, we can see that the G dyn policy is servicing the traffic because both of these policies have dynamic applications specified. So that brings us to the end of this Learning Byte. In this Learning Byte, we discussed Unified Policy Processing Order, and then we also demonstrated how to configure unified policies and verify Unified Policy Processing Order. So as always, thanks for watching.
Visit the Juniper Education Services website to learn more about courses. View our full range of classroom, online, and e-learning courses. Learning paths, industry segment and technology-specific training paths. Juniper Network's certification program, the ultimate demonstration of your competence. And the training community, from forums to social media. Join the discussion.